Cool. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for wherever you're watching this. My name is Dayle Rodriguez, formerly of Amicari Services, and today with me I have Trevor Fenton of Plain English Law. Yeah, thank you for joining me, Trevor, for
Thanks
this
for
kind
having
of
me.
live stream. I think I've known you like a good 4 or 5 months now, a bit longer.
Yeah, probably closer to a year actually.
It's been
Yeah,
close to a year. Yeah, sorry
yeah,
about that. I just yeah, and basically I've enjoyed speaking with you, learning about law and your passion and enthusiasm for like no nonsense law. So I thought I'd have you on. People can get to know you a little bit better, get a better understanding of your background, and yeah, um, just learn about the passion of plain English law. If that's cool with you, I assume that's cool with
yeah.
you.
Very cool. Thanks.
Okay. I guess the first question is where are you originally from and where are you based now? That's two questions. Sorry.
Well, as you can tell from my accent, I'm probably not originally from Dundee, which is where Plain English Law is based. I grew up in Canada, actually, in Ottawa, and moved over to sort of lived a little bit all over in Canada, most recently in Vancouver, and moved over to the UK about 10 years ago now.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, was there a particular reason for the move to from Canada to Scotland, or just
Yeah,
felt
I
like it,
was
or
Yeah, well, a bit of both, but no, I was bringing a business over from Canada. So I was a partner in a very small, specialized corporate tax firm that saw an opportunity in the market in the UK to expand its offering from Canada over here, and so moved over in 2011 to expand the business into the UK, and it established it in Salford in 2011. And well, for perfectly honest, we just didn't read the market terribly well, and that didn't work out. So the next thing was, well, go back to Canada or find something else to do.
Mhm.
And I ended up finding work in Edinburgh, moved north, and ultimately landed in Dundee about 7 years ago.
okay, that's the story from there. Um, for people like me, because before I met you, I didn't know a lot about law. Now, I'm right in saying you specialize in commercial law. Is that right?
Yeah, commercial law and also GDPR, like privacy law compliance as well. But commercial law in the sense that what I was doing for the first 5 years that I was in Dundee is I was working in house for a multinational company that's based in Dundee,
Hmm.
and what an in-house lawyer does generally, especially for smaller companies, is very generalized. It's acting as a business advisor. It's obviously there's a legal component to it, and that's always central to what an in-house lawyer does. But
Yeah.
it is sort of essentially whatever legal issues that the company ends up facing, you either find the answer for it yourself, or you go find the people who can help you find that answer.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why you went into this kind of field of law? I mean, because I know law is a massive generalist term. Is there a particular reason why you wanted to go to commercial law specifically?
No, if I'm perfectly honest, I kind of fell into it. But I think a lot of things that people will do with their careers, where they find something they really enjoy, they will fall into it, much like I fell into this, um, and be surprised, frankly, by how much I ended up enjoying it. So one of the things I didn't want to do early in my career, I liked the idea of having the freedom of running my own business. I didn't like the idea of actually running the business, of having to deal with compliance, of having to deal, for a solicitor's firm, having to deal with a client money account, which involves a whole lot of rules and compliance, and just
Hmm.
it seemed very fiddly to me, and it was something I wasn't interested in at all. But one of the experiences I had working for the firm back in Canada just before I moved to the UK was I ended up essentially managing that firm and managing its finances, working with the accountant,
Yeah.
and I ended up responsible for the client money account there. And the thing that surprised me the most is the bit I liked the most about working with that firm was actually doing all the stuff I had avoided doing in my career before. So all of that, back end stuff, and that included negotiating contracts, drafting the contracts with joint venture partners, with other members of the firm, creating the partnership structure that firm worked on. So and still operates under. So those things, like I said, I didn't expect to enjoy any of it. I viewed them as an imposition and a burden when I first had to start doing it. And as I got into it, I was like, actually, this is kind of, unexpectedly rather a lot of fun. It provided some
Mm.
It just provided some joy that I wasn't expecting. And so that sort of took me into looking at, well, how are these contracts put together and why do they even look like this in the first place? Because I'm not finding the way that these that other lawyers, when they present me with contracts, I'm not finding them very helpful. And I don't see a need for them to look like this.
Was it a more of a pivotal slash eureka moment when you said when you did that to kind of lean you towards plain English law, or was it more of a gradual, as in, like, you realize you've been dealing with this kind of contracts and you went, what is this all about? Like, was it gradual or light bulb moment?
Well, if I'm perfectly honest, the origin of my plain English interest in plain English practice goes back to law school, because I had a professor who, in first year, was teaching us about drafting documents and interpreting statutes and so on, and she was passionate about writing in plain English. She had a background, I think, probably as an English teacher, and so she taught us actually structurally, how do you do this, and what is it that makes a document sort of legalese heavy and difficult to read, and what techniques can you use to make the document more usable for the people who are most likely to read it. Because that's the first thing you have to stop and ask yourself is, who's going to read this document and what are they going to try to do with it? Because if you don't start there, you're going to have a really difficult time aiming your writing at an appropriate level for the people who need it the most.
Okay, I mean, I'm here to ask the layman's terms or silly questions, if I'm honest, because before I met you, I didn't realize that some of the legalese wasn't necessary, and I'll explain why. So, I like watching law and drama shows, so the likes of
So do
Suits,
I.
Boston Legal, and I don't know if it counts, but Ally McBeal, throwback to the 90s. Anyway, where the perception of law on TV, especially these kind of shows, I know they're dramatized heavily, is that if you don't get your wording right in the contract, some unscrupulous genius lawyer is going to find a loophole. Am I right in thinking, and obviously that's not actually how it works in real life, and obviously for people like me who watched shows like that, you're just kind of watching the drama, right? It doesn't actually happen that way. Am I right? Or
Probably. Here's what I'd say. I haven't spent a ton of time in the courtroom. I've, actually very little in my career, but most lawyers spend very little time in the courtroom. And I'll tell you why. There aren't actually that many court cases. So if you just actually stop and think about how many contracts you personally have handled and agreed to over the course of your life. And I'm not talking necessarily about ones that you signed in ink, although those count too. I'm talking about every time you go to a website and you click through, you might have obviously ticked a box saying, I accept your terms and conditions. But it could simply be something that, purchasing something online, you are forming a contract. You might not have looked at the terms and conditions, but there will be, or there should be anyway, terms and conditions somewhere on that website that will govern your relationship with the person who's selling you the goods or the services that you're buying. We do this almost every day.
yeah,
Now, if you and every time you do that, you form a contract. Now, my question is, think about how many times you've been in a courtroom in your life arguing with somebody about what one of those contracts means.
no, when you put it that way, almost next to zero. I mean, I think every time my laptop updates, every time iTunes updates, I click the I agree.
Yep.
So that's okay. No, you make a valid point. So yeah.
And how many times have you been in court arguing over a commercial contract?
Never, not once.
I'm a lawyer. I've never done it. When I think of all the people that I've met, especially over the pandemic, when you've got, you're on Zoom calls day after day and you've got, 25, 30, 40 people on a screen in front of your face. And I've asked this question out of curiosity. I said, put up your hand if you have ever, just in the last 10 years, been in a courtroom arguing over a commercial contract. I've tried this with probably at least 200 or 300 people, and I'm yet to see a single hand go up. So the point is, who is using that document the most? Now, on Ally McBeal and on LA Law, I'm going to go back even further. LA Law is where I cut my teeth watching legal drama. But yes, it's like you put it, right? There's going to be some very clever clause, or worse, a not very clever clause where someone's made a mistake writing it. That means that some unexpected outcome from the court case, loses someone millions and millions of pounds. That almost never happens. And even number one, because most of the contracts that we deal with aren't worth millions of pounds. But even the ones that are worth millions of pounds, most of those don't end up in court either. Now they could do, but think about what people do when they get into a dispute in the first place. They do not immediately run to court. Most people don't anyway. The court processes in most countries, or in a lot of countries anyway, don't let you just run off to court before you try something else. You know, there's a pre-action protocol that you'll have to go through in many jurisdictions, writing a letter, setting out your complaint, setting out the grounds for your complaint, basically to tell the other side, look, I think I've got a claim against you. Here's the claim. I really don't want to, I'd really rather work this out, but I'll go to court if I have to. So go through all those steps. The courtroom is miles down the track, and almost never, proportionately, almost no one ever gets there. So then now we come back to what's the point of the document? The point of the document, in my view, is to try to defuse that conflict before it gets to the point where it has to end up in court. So think through what happens. You don't like something that your business partner did,
Mhm.
or your customer, whatever it is. And the first thing you might, or you'll say to yourself is, well, they're not allowed to do that. Now, if you've got a written contract with them, and you
Mhm.
remember that you've got a written contract with them, you might go to your desk drawer, to your email file, whatever it is, and pull that document out and start reading through it to see, well, what are they allowed to do? And am I right? If you understand that document, if in reading that document it's clear to you what it says and who's allowed to do what, then you're going to be able to use that document quite effectively. But I guarantee you're probably going to read it, whether it's usable to you or not. So those are the people who use the document the most. It's the people who signed the document. It's not judges. And so that's why I say, some lawyers think in terms of, I write for the judge. I write the contract for the judge. And I think that's actually kind of getting it backwards. I write it for my client, and I write it for their customer or their supplier or their business partner, because those are the people who will use it. They're guaranteed to use it. A judge may use it, but that's a very, very small likelihood. And here's the other thing: if my client understands that document, and if their customer understands it, I can pretty much guarantee you the judge will understand it as well. So
Well,
you
hope,
don't
yes.
have to you don't have to do anything special for them. They're clever people. They'll be able to follow along as well.
So I'm going to ask like two kind of follow-up questions to lead it in a slightly different direction. Why is legalese still used today, and where did it come from? Is it something that's ingrained in the culture? Because you said in law school you had a lecturer that taught you kind of like, to do things in plain English.
Yeah,
but you can't be the only one, because obviously there are still contracts out there that are ridiculous. Like I had a contract the other day that had the word herewith in it. But don't get me wrong, it's a good word. Don't get me wrong. I like words like that. They sound really cool. But like when you're reading that on a piece of paper, and the vis-a-vis and the like, I don't know, do you have any examples of ones that you really dislike or see often?
Oh yeah, well the word desirous. I love this one contract. I was reviewing it, and it says it started off saying Company A and Company B are desirous of entering into discussions regarding Project A. And I don't know about you, but I feel a range of emotions when I'm reading a contract, but desirous is not high on that list.
Does that mean would like to? I don't know what desirous means without Googling. I'm not going to lie.
Because when I redrafted it, it simply, that sentence simply comes out as Company A and Company B intend to discuss Project A.
Okay.
Nobody needs to be desirous of anything. Just they intend to discuss it. Okay. So just say that. Just make it,
So where does legalese come from? Why do we have it?
It's historical. It's habit. It's I mean, if you think about, if you've ever read old business letters, correspondence, even, I don't know, I'm sort of thinking back to sort of 19th century. If you've ever read how people would write to each other, even just letters between friends. The writing style was a lot more formal than it is today. There's no question. contracts are even more formal than that, and they use a lot of they have used historically they've used very technical, very legal language, and lawyers today, of course, they come through law school reading cases that have been decided by judges decades and centuries ago, because that's where our law comes from. It's sort of it's a body of yeah, there are statutes, there are laws passed by Parliament, but there's also court case after court case,
Is that what lawyers talk about when they say precedent? Like there's precedent for
yeah,
this,
precedent, exactly.
Prevent. Okay.
Yeah, and so in a common law system such as we have in such as the English system, and the Canadian system is based on the English system, and even in Scotland, our contract law is largely common law based. Then in systems like that, the idea is basically you look at what they've decided in the past, and you keep making decisions in the same situation. You want to make the same decision as was made before. That's how you get consistency. And so you're always looking back to what has been written in the past, and how can you find examples of cases that look like the case I'm facing now. And if that's the case, or if I do find a case like that, what was decided? Because that will, that's where you find the rules that will govern whatever dispute you're dealing with today. So you're always looking at stuff that was written, decades
that must be quite
centuries ago.
Quite difficult from a commercial perspective, and going on to one of your specialisms, like data protection, GDPR. Now, the internet is in the human history is very, very new, and I can imagine like trying to argue, debate, or create contracts around something so modern and looking at precedent from 200 years ago can be quite difficult, right? Kind of pushing those two together.
Right.
That wasn't really a question, sorry. It was more of a statement.
Yeah, and the thing is that the internet is a modern thing, but it exists in a world that is, or sorry, it uses legal principles that existed before the internet was built. So it's not new legal principles. It's legal principles that have been around for centuries. And when you get to GDPR and data privacy laws, those are new legal concepts, but they're still built on the existing legal context, right? They're still built on the traditions that we had, on the understanding that we had of the world when people realized, oh, hey, we live in this world where suddenly people are using different technology, but the technology doesn't always change the underlying activity, right? It's the medium that's changed, but the content is just being delivered in a different way, and maybe that'll have consequences for people's privacy that wouldn't have been a problem in the print era. So we'll have to adjust things to adjust the legal landscape to account for that. But aside from that, most of the legal frameworks that existed before the internet still apply to the internet with some updating.
Okay.
So then contracts, you ask where these legalese contracts come from. It is court precedents, but also what happens is at some point along the line, lawyers have they have their own databases of precedents that they will use to create new contracts from, because it'd be insanely expensive to redraft a contract from scratch every time you went to draft a contract for a client. So I need a contract that deals with, I don't know, distributing a distributor contract for my product, and I want to sign up distributors across the UK. So you go to your lawyer and say, look, I need a distributor contract that deals with this. And your lawyer's not going to start from scratch. They're going to look through a bank of precedents looking for something that comes close. They'll grab that precedent and start amending it to suit your situation. The thing is, that precedent is, who knows who wrote the original, where did that precedent come from? And how many different, when was it first drafted? And then as a lawyer, once you grab that precedent and start amending it, there could be things in there that you would have phrased differently, but you don't have time. Maybe your client's not willing to pay you to rewrite the precedent. They want the contract done for a reasonable price. And if I'm perfectly honest, the fastest, cheapest way to get some of these things done is to go with what people have used before. The problem with that is you lose not only do you lose innovation, but you lose where's the thought process that goes into, do these clauses actually serve the people who are trying to read them, trying to use them every day, rather than thinking, does this clause meet this court decision from 1861 that came up with this particular rule that actually most people doing business day to day, they've never heard of the rule, or if they did hear of the rule, they certainly would have never talk about it in those terms, because they don't, it's overly formal. It's just not the way people talk anymore. So I think it's just, it's that these templates have been propagated through the years because people are terrified to change them because they must look like that way for a reason. And it just on and on it goes. And then the next generation of lawyers gets trained using the same templates.
Fair enough. Sorry, I just experienced a few technical difficulties. A few people saying they can't get onto the live stream, so I'm just trying to. All right, I've shared the link. Hopefully, people can pop in and jump in. That'll be great. If not, then again, it's been recorded and we can maybe edit this out later. I don't know. Maybe we'll leave it in. Authenticity. Because you were, sorry, you were on like a fantastic, explanation of legalese, why it's used and how it came about and why we still use it. And my follow-up question to that is, do you have any specific moments or recollections of when legalese has been a pain in the past for clients perhaps, or you've come across situations where it wasn't particularly helpful to have legalese?
Yeah, and it can really slow business down. I've had a couple of clients in the past who have been using contract templates for when they're selling services or goods, and they've relied on these templates for some time, and they find it actually because these templates are complicated, because they are written in terms that they never speak to their customers in. Mm-hmm. And so their customers, they've been selling something, they've been getting their customers interested in buying this product or service from them. The customer finally gets there, says, yeah, great, I'm ready to buy. And then they slap this, very densely worded document full of all shouty all caps and full of language that nobody actually ever spoke to them before when they were considering buying the product. And now they're looking at this going, well, what is this? And how does this even relate to what it is that I'm buying from you? And why are all these contract terms really imbalanced and unfair? And why do they impose all sorts of obligations on me that I wouldn't expect? It just looks like your lawyers sat down and thought, how can we tilt this in favor, in some clever way in favor of our client? There's nothing clever about that. What you're really doing is you're poking your customer in the eye, because they come in and go, well, wait a second, this isn't the conversation we had. And why would I do business with somebody who wants to have these terms tilted in their favor in a way that's really unnecessary and unfair? So they come back to my client saying, basically, well, what is this? And why would I sign it? And often the client is saying, well, actually, I don't really know, because I didn't draft it. We got someone to draft it for us. And, we just sort of thought, well, it's just the legal paperwork. That's what it needs to look like. I can't think of anything that's further from the truth. It doesn't need to look like that, because all of the written terms, all that they do is they're just the deal that you're looking to do with your customer. It's that deal written down, because everything in that contract comes down to essentially 5 points. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. Here's the price. Here's the schedule. And if one of us doesn't do what we promised to do, here's what we're going to do about it. Now, that's a conversation that you probably had with your customer or with your supplier before you even pulled out the legal paperwork. So why does the legal paperwork look any different?
Could you repeat that again and slower? Because that was really good. The 5 points. Sorry, just
every contract, commercial contract I've ever seen comes down to, I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. Here's the price. Here's the schedule. And if one of us doesn't do what we promised, here's what we're going to do about it. Maybe a sixth thing, if something else goes wrong, here's who's going to pay for it. Really, everything. Now, people say, well, we need some legal advice in this. Well, actually, sometimes you do, but 95% of what's in there is a commercial agreement. And so these are, you've got two business people who are negotiating, here's how we're going to work together. This is what I'm going to sell you, and this is how it's going to work. they really, why would the contract then be written in this kind of flowery pseudo Shakespearean language that neither one of them speak? It's their deal. And so when I write a contract, my first thought is, I'm not writing about my business. I'm writing about my client's business. So it should look like, they should recognize what's on it, because if they read that document and don't understand what's there, it's not really about their business anymore, is it?
No, you're right. And I think, again, so thank you for explaining it, because from my perspective, if you're not a lawyer, I assumed that in business, like, you had to have those words in there, like they were important to make the contract legally binding. But obviously, that's
No.
not the case. And some side note, good news. Thank you to Harry, Gareth, and Eva for joining us. They've managed to get on despite the technical difficulties. They are here. They've actually gone around the back door, if that makes sense. So technically, they are in the guest room. They can actually join us live at some point if I click the wrong button. So thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us. Yeah, generally appreciate you guys listening and getting nuggets from Trevor. So with regards to plain English law, I know you kind of specialize in the SME space. Is there a particular reason why you went for SMEs or want to help SMEs? Is it because you are an SME? Yeah.
Yes, partly that, but also, and partly that's because that's where my experience is, and partly because larger companies tend to have their own legal teams, and so the sort of the segment of the market I'm really interested in helping. I'll help very small businesses, but I will also help businesses that sort of fall into a gap, I would say. Usually somewhere between about, I don't know, maybe 20 and 200 employees. But there's a gap that a lot of companies fall into where they're just not at that scale where they either want or need or can afford to have a full-time in-house lawyer. And yet they could really use the benefits that come from having someone, on an ongoing basis who gets to know their business really well, that they can essentially have as their legal department, sort of at the end of a string, without worrying about paying, sort of the high hourly rates that people tend to pay to high street firms. So if I have a client that makes a commitment to my firm to a certain minimum volume of business per month, let's be frank, it de-risks my business, right? It means I know that I've got a steady revenue stream, and what that means is, like any other business person, I can sharpen my pencil and give better rates. And what I've seen from a number of companies that I've dealt with, who are sort of in that, who've grown, from being a startup, and they've added staff as they went along, and one department after another, they add, an internal HR service, and then they add internal marketing possibly first. They'll add finance. All these different internal services that serve the business. When they started out, they couldn't afford all of those. They bring them in one at a time. Legal tends to be well down the track, just because you tend to be a considerably larger business before you actually need that. So what do you do when you're growing through that phase? And that's the part of the market I really like to serve, because chances are, as you've built the business, there are all sorts of compliance bits that you haven't built into it, because that's not why you get out of bed in the morning, right? When you start a business, unless you're an accountant, and with all due respect, I realize accountant Dayle,
easy, Tiger, easy.
There aren't a whole lot of people who start a business and say, pop out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning going, I cannot wait to do that VAT return. Accountants do, I get that. But most people who aren't accountants do not do that, right? I can't wait to do that VAT return, or I can't wait to file that confirmation statement with Companies House. This is very exciting. When can I draft my next director's minutes? And I just can't wait to sit down and draft that contract. Most people don't. That's not why they got into business.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I would argue that many accountants don't like doing that either. They like the other stuff outside of that. But sorry, yeah, please continue.
But what gets you out of bed is whatever product or service it is that you're building a business around, and going out and getting your name out there, building your brand, building your customer base. That's what gets people out of bed in the morning. And so as the company grows and as they succeed, things start, frankly, they can get a little bit out of hand. And after a while, you turn around, you've got 20, 30, 40 employees, you've got a good steady stream of revenue, and you turn around and you might realize, we never got around to building some of those compliance bits. We were still operating on the terms and conditions that we downloaded from lawdepot.com, and we never really had the time or the expertise to go through them and figure out, does this actually meet our needs? And so now it's time, when you've got the time to do that, and when you've got the resources to be able to pay someone, like I said, not full time, but for a part time ongoing assistance like that, that's where I like to step in, because I think I can really help, not just in plain English, but help get those bits together so that the companies can get not just non-compliance, but get the legalese and the nonsense out of the way of the customer relationship and out of the way of their business growth.
One of the things I like about talking to you and dislike about talking to you is you answer the questions of what you're going to ask. So I was going to ask you about the elephant in the room, template contracts, but you've already kind of touched on that. And my understanding of what you just said is basically you'll start up, you get template contracts in place, and over a few years they won't quite be fit for purpose, and that's actually where you need a little bit more specialism. So that's why you wouldn't use template contracts going forwards. Is that correct?
Well, kind of. I'll be perfectly honest. I use template contracts. It's just the templates I use are different, right? I draft. If you go to a commercial service that has lots of templates available, you can find templates. I mean, and lawyers do this, by the way. Every law firm I know of subscribes to either LexisNexis or Practical Law. They're quite expensive websites that provide lots of very good information and lots of very helpful templates. But there are also helpful templates that tend to be far longer, far more detailed, and often full of legalese nonsense. They need that stuff hammered out of the templates in order for them to be more real world. And that's what, so I do tend to start with those templates, but what I'll do is then I'll create my own version of them that we have the length and won't have the passive voice and the really long sentences and the convoluted, exceptions, sentences with 6 and 7 and 8 and 10 commas in them. That stuff's got to go, because it makes the document, less usable for the people who are most likely to read it, which, like I said, is your customer, it's your supplier, it's your business partner, and it's you as a business person.
Okay, I'm going to ask a very direct question. What is the real world impact of having plain English contracts? Like what does that mean for me as the business owner or as the employee? What does that do? How does it work? What's the benefit?
The benefit is it first of all builds trust, because your customer, when they read the document, aren't sitting there wondering what is this company's lawyer trying to pull? What is this company trying to pull on me with this language that I don't really understand? I don't know why this clause is in there. I don't know how it operates. I can't think of a situation where that would happen. I just don't get it, right? So anytime you have that can affect the trust between you and your customer or your supplier. Why is this there? What does that do? Well, one of two things. Either they just go quiet, you don't hear from them again, and you might not even realize actually things were fine until I read that contract. Or they call in, and if you're a larger company with a call center and you're thinking, okay, well, we've only got so many staff to handle customer service and so on. I've seen this happen, that when you improve contract templates, the volume of calls drops. The amount of work that you need to do to explain yourself to your customer will drop, because the customer will read it. And if it's drafted not just in an understandable way, but then you actually stop and you ask yourself, do I need these one-sided terms? Or what is the balance that we're trying to strike here between what I need and what my customer needs? If we strike that balance correctly with a fair deal that the customer can understand, they're far less likely to have to pick up the phone and ask your staff, what does this all mean? Saves you money.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for answering that. It saves business money. So again, less negotiation around contracts. If it's simple, understandable, then everyone agrees. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure I've hit the road with all my questions. And to be honest, like I said, you answer things before I ask them, which is great and frustrating at the same time. No, it's don't apologize.
I have to admit, I mean, I'm just looking at the clock, and it's only 36 minutes into this, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember the last time anybody said I was, too brief in my comments. I'm not usually accused of being, reluctant to speak.
No, I appreciate it. It makes it so much easier, because if it's just me asking questions to people and it's like yes, no, maybe, that's very boring. It's obviously you're very passionate about it. It's very clear that there is a benefit to the way you do law and the way you do commercial law. So I get that. Saves time, saves money. One thing I have to ask you about as well. Sorry. probably the final question, and you've already kind of touched it, but I want to ask it very specifically. It's on your website. What is virtual counsel? What is that?
Oh, that's what we were talking about earlier. This idea of if you're not really at the scale where you need, want, or can afford a full-time in-house lawyer, how do you get that in-house lawyer type service without hiring somebody full-time? You could put out an advertisement for a part-time position, and there are some solicitors who might be interested in that, but actually they tend to be pretty difficult positions to fill. That's where I can come in and say, look, if I can give you that both the flexibility of not having someone on your payroll, right? So if you find after a month or two, actually we don't need this on an ongoing basis, then we're done, and you haven't made that kind of commitment to someone and sort of promise them something that you might not want or be able to keep providing. Promise them a job ongoing. If you don't want to do that, but you still need that level of support for a period of time, it's exactly where I think a virtual in-house counsel and virtual counsel can step in and provide essentially that same service, that commercial thinking with the legal overlay, if you will, but without inflating your payroll.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for explaining. Are there any kind of final takeaways that you want to kind of mention, or things you want to prompt people to, as opposed to me leading with questions? Anything you just want to say to get off your chest in general? I know. I know. I know the answer to that question already, but I thought I'd ask it anyway, just to put you on the spot. I like making your face go red. It's fun.
Oh, okay, anyway. Yeah. Cheers. No, that's it for me.
Okay. Cool.
Apologies to everyone who tried to get in before and couldn't. I'm glad you. Thank you for persisting, and I'm glad that you were able to make it and join Dayle and us for this. Dayle and I for this conversation. Thank you.
So I'm just reading a comment by Gareth. He says, "I love a takeaway." I'm assuming he means like a Chinese or an Indian or something like that.
And I don't blame you. It is kind of getting to that time of the afternoon too.
All right. Again, there's funny comments coming in, and I think some of them are inside jokes. So I'll leave it there. So yeah, Harry, Eva, Gareth, anyone else who has been watching, thank you very much for joining us. Anyone who's watching the recording, thank you for watching to thus far, until this point. Yeah, Trevor, it's been great having you on talking. Again, like I said, I'm a big fan of the work that you do and how you do it, and I've learned so much from you. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Take care, everyone. Bye.